Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Mac and Jack Show, our Saturday debate edition. I am here with Hall of Fame boxing writer Jack Hirsch, uh, best bookseller Dr. Paul Semendinger, and of course, I am the Philly sports guy filling in for Mac today. Good morning, gentlemen. How are yous?
We're doing
Hey,
great.
good morning.
So just because I want to mention this because you mentioned it just before we were about to go on, and I had to, I gotta imagine that I am amongst a couple of people who really enjoyed this. Uh, are the wheels falling off of the Red Sox? The Red Sox seem to what was it? The Yankees scored 14, 13. Now they're giving up 28, 11 in an inning. Is it really a
Well,
mess over there?
Toronto, I'm looking at the scores as they go along. During the evening, the out-of-town scores. And at one point, I noticed Toronto's beating the Red Sox 29-3. And I come back, it seems like 10, 15 minutes later, and it's 25-3. And then now I'm checking to see the individual box scores to see whether it's a typo or whatever, which occasionally happens to typo. And it's happening, a 7-run inning, an 11-run inning. And, the funny thing about it, guys, I think at the end of 5 innings or so, Toronto had 25 runs. And I eventually went to sleep before the game was over. And they wind up with 29 runs. And I'm disappointed in a sense. And I'm saying that's all. But when you think of it, 4 more innings left and they average a run an inning. And I'm disappointed as to their offensive output. But I do want to give your Philadelphia Phillies, Pax, an honorable mention in last night because they gave up 15 runs, losing 15-2 to the lowly Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, I figure you love to give me a little jab when you can.
Honorable mention,
that's okay. We're allowed to have games like that every once in a while. We'll just call it that the rust came off yesterday because they had not played in a couple of days. So it is what it is. I mean, I could go ahead and say the same thing with the Yankees. The Yankees bats were a little soft, on Thursday as they got swept in the doubleheader. So
yeah, I'm worried about the Astros. The Astros are really, really good, and they're only a couple of games behind the Yankees for the best record in the American League. So if the Yankees, continue to play mediocre baseball through the rest of July and into August, and the Astros stay hot, the Yankees could be facing, assuming they get there, an American League Championship Series as the visiting team, having to play a Game 7 in Houston. Yankees haven't been able to beat the Astros in the playoffs. And I made this point on Start Spreading the News yesterday. When the Yankees play a team like the Twins in the playoffs, the team less so, but the fans are always saying, oh, we're playing the Twins. We always beat the Twins. We always beat the Twins. Piece of cake. Well, guess what the Astros and the Astros fans are thinking when they play the Yankees? We always beat the Yankees. Piece of cake. Yankees haven't beat the Astros in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's all irrelevant once you get to the postseason. I actually agreed with Aaron Boone. No matter what happens, I remember in 1988, the Dodgers and the Mets during the regular season. I think, the Mets completely dominated them. It was like lopsided. And then the Dodgers beat the Mets in the championship series. So I think it's irrelevant once you get there. I don't know, is it inside the players' heads? Whether they're thinking, can we really beat these guys, or whether we doubt ourselves or not. But what's interesting with the Astros? Carlos Correa, a centerpiece of that team, he left, and they haven't missed a beat at all. They're the same team that's went to the World Series. And it makes me think of other cases. The Nationals lose Bryce Harper to your Phillies, and they win the World Series. A-Rod leaves Seattle, he goes to the Texas Rangers, and the Mariners win 116 games. So it kind of makes me think maybe you can't afford to absorb the loss of an ace pitcher, your main guy in the bullpen. But any team, it seems, can absorb the loss of one individual position player, which might bring us later on to Aaron Judge.
I was just going to say that. I wrote a thing the other day and I said, everybody keeps assuming that if the Yankees make a big enough offer that Aaron Judge is staying. But what if Aaron Judge doesn't want to stay? I mean, there's a very good chance that maybe he wants to go play in California. How do we know what's in Aaron Judge's head? And how do we know that Aaron Judge is going to be a Yankee no matter what? We don't know that. And he might decide to go to another team, or another team like Robbie Cano might make him a huge offer. And there's all sorts of examples. Carlos Correa, Bryce Harper, Pete Rose left the Phillies. Left the Reds and went to the Phillies.
Stay with the Reds. The Reds.
But he went to the Phillies. The Phillies then won the World Series, right? Like these guys, they don't necessarily stay. Dave Winfield left the Padres. I mean, you go on and on. Albert Pujols left the Cardinals. On and on, where these great players, they leave their teams. And what you're saying, Jack, is even if the Yankees lose Aaron Judge, maybe they'll still be okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and we've talked about that. And we've talked about that a little bit on previous shows. I would deal with Keith Engel, and he's obviously a big Yankees fan. And he was saying, well, he kind of believes that Judge wants to end his career as a Yankee. So, and that's going to play a part, and that ultimately he may take a couple $1 million less not to go somewhere else because he wants to stay in New York.
A couple $1 million left. 200.
Well, I'm saying a couple, like two. I'm not talking 20.
I believe he'd do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
I'm not saying.
I believe that he might be saying it's time for me to go.
I don't think so. I think if all factors are equal, they get it done. What annoys me about this Judge thing right now, isn't he the one who said no negotiating once the season began? So how can he be annoyed at the Yankees at this moment if he's not allowing them to make an offer? Now, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe they are talking. Maybe there's no movement in negotiating behind the scenes. But if we take what Judge said at face value, and his representatives are not speaking with the Yankees now, how can he possibly be annoyed at the Yankees? I don't get it. Is he annoyed about the arbitration thing because they basically split it down the middle? I mean, but this is business. The Yankees came up, he came down. And I like the Yankees' policy as far as, not just giving an athlete anything, but I think in Judge's case, the ship already sailed. They should have gotten it done a while ago. They should have realized that Judge was the heir apparent to Derek Jeter's the face of the franchise. So I really think the Yankees, before the season began, you had Judge all to yourself to make an offer. You should have given him the type of offer you would give him as if he were a free agent. And they're going to give him a better offer, maybe a substantially better offer than they did before the season began. And that's my argument against the Yankees. Had they given Judge a heck of an offer that would have made it hard to turn down before the season, I think it would have gotten done.
Well, you know what? This is a really good segue. Even though when we gave our list of questions, we made this question number 5, but let's put it up into question number 1 since we're kind of talking about it right now.
You can't get enough of Aaron Judge, now.
Yeah,
2 homers yesterday.
See, and luckily that thank God he's so good, because they got a scare from the Orioles. The Orioles started to come back, and they only beat the Orioles 7-6. The Orioles are streaking a little bit. If it wasn't for the All-Star break stopping them, they would be listed amongst one of the hotter teams in baseball, going around, and they're like 1 game under 500 right now. So, but the Yankees, obviously they won yesterday, but they lost the doubleheader to the Houston. If they don't get past Houston, and especially talking to 2 Yankee people, one more than the other, do you feel that Aaron Boone should lose his job?
No, absolutely not. I mean, you have that many wins in the regular season. I mean, what's Aaron Boone doing wrong? I mean, our buddy Keith Engel says, well, bottom line is they haven't been to the World Series since 2009, so he should go. I mean, Keith Engel, who's a great guy, a smart guy, a knowledgeable guy, one we respect greatly. He's sounding like George Steinbrenner here. Think of it. And the fans are sounding like him, and you're sounding like him, Pax. And I hope Doc doesn't sound like him. Dick Hauser wins 103 games in 1980 for the Yankees and he gets fired? I mean, think of that. That's kind of ludicrous. There are 30 teams in Major League Baseball. So the odds are you're going to win the World Series 1 out of every 30 years, right? Percentage-wise, think of it. I mean, 30 teams, if every team takes turns winning the World Series, you're winning it once every 30 years. But this is the Yankees. I understand a little higher payroll, the tradition. Of course, Aaron Boone shouldn't get fired. The Yankees have exceeded expectations with the year they've had, and he's played his part in it. He's used the bullpen really well. He's made a lot of good moves. He's very good at dealing with the press, even though he got a little edgy on the Astro question. And no, Aaron Boone should definitely stay unless Aaron Boone does something in the interim to cost the Yankees games. He panics and they don't take the next step in the playoffs because Aaron Boone truly messed up. That would be the only possible scenario I could see.
I think what you're saying is the exact right idea there. If the Yankees win 110 games and they lose in the playoffs, God forbid, but if they do, then you know what? Aaron Boone doesn't deserve to be fired. But if they stumble through the rest of July and August and September and barely make it into the playoffs after the great start, and part of the reason why they're stumbling is because of poor decisions that the manager makes, or if they lose games like Grady Little doing some bad jobs in the playoffs when the Red Sox were playing the Yankees in the early 2000s, then maybe he deserves to lose his job. But all things being equal, if you win the division, you've done your job as a manager, and then you have to try to win through the playoffs. Now, Boone has never proven to be a great postseason manager, but I don't think if the Yankees win a bunch of games and he manages the way he's always managed, I don't think he's a great manager, but that's beside the point. I don't think he deserves to be fired.
Well, then let's do the caveat to that question, as we were talking about Aaron Judge, that if how much say will Judge have on Aaron Boone staying, whether they make it? If they win the World Series, obviously it's a no-brainer. Everybody stays, I believe. If they lose to the Astros again, and especially after the turmoil that happened last year with Aaron Boone and getting the rest of his coaching staff fired and keeping him, do you believe Aaron Boone would have a say in whether, or not Aaron Boone, would Aaron Judge have a say in whether Aaron Boone stays or not? And secondly, if they decide to go against, like say they want that Judge doesn't like playing for Boone and says, well, I want a new manager here, and they don't give him a new manager, that he decides to walk?
I don't think, I think it means 0% in Aaron Judge's decision. I mean, he might like Aaron Boone a lot. It's business. Their manager turnovers all the time. You know what's thought-provoking, guys? For any sport now, if you have a superstar player, and Judge, I guess, is a superstar for the Yankees at the current time, but I'm talking about a Michael Jordan type. A Michael Jordan can tell an organization, and when he was in his prime, I'll sign this 5-year contract, meaning I have to be here 5 years, but if you fire the coach, I can opt out at the end of the year. And I believe a team might adhere to that because they know if they lose that one player, the franchise takes a bad dip. But I don't think you quite have that in baseball. There's no one of that magnitude of Michael Jordan or LeBron James who could command that type of power. I mean, we saw Aaron Rodgers have it to a degree with the Packers where he could say, okay, I'm coming back. He could say, I'm coming back under the condition you have to keep the coach X amount of time. As soon as the coach is let go, I can become a free agent again. And the Packers may have given in to something like that. Not that they weren't happy with LaFleur, their coach, but I'm just giving an example. But I think it counts for 0% in this Aaron Judge, Aaron Boone case. I think Aaron Judge might like Aaron Boone. I have no clue, but certainly not enough where he says, oh, I'm going to stay if Aaron Boone is staying. I mean, no way.
Well,
yeah, I don't think Aaron. I'm sorry.
Go. I'm sorry.
No,
I
you
don't mean that he could say go if Aaron Boone doesn't stay or that he doesn't want to stay if Aaron Boone stays.
Can I just say, Doc, can I have permission to say one thing before you start, so I don't interrupt you for the 14th time, in the last couple of shows? I think one thing that could factor in slightly to Aaron Judge staying, I want to hear your opinion on this. He's close buddies with Anthony Rizzo, who has 1 year on his contract left at $16 million a year after this season. If the Yankees were to sign Rizzo to a couple of more years, extend them, I think it factors in a little bit to Aaron Judge. It gets him thinking a little bit more. I wouldn't mind staying here and being with my pal Rizzo.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know of how much the manager will factor into Aaron Judge's decision, and I don't think Anthony Rizzo will factor into his decision either. They might like each other. They could hang out off season whenever they want. I don't think Anthony Rizzo has a million years left in his career anyway. And so for Aaron Judge to think about a 10-year deal or an 8-year deal based upon 2 or 3 of them being with Anthony Rizzo, I don't think anybody would work those odds if you were doing any type of decision. Well, I'm going to make a 10-year decision, but the first 3, I might do it just because this guy's going to be with me. And I don't know about the last 7. So I don't think that's a good way to make a decision anyway. So I just think there's an even chance that Aaron Judge isn't going to be made the best offer by the Yankees. And I think there's an even chance that even if he is, that maybe he says, I don't want to play in New York. He wouldn't be the first guy to say that. There's people who say like the Yankees should get Ohtani. Maybe the Yankees could swing a big trade and get Ohtani. And well, who says Ohtani wants to play in New York? Ohtani played when he had his chance to pick any team. He picked California. He said, I don't want to play for the Yankees. So who's to say that when he becomes a free agent, he's going to sign with the Yankees, or that the Yankees could trade for him and then re-sign him? He might have no interest in playing in New York. And Aaron Judge might just say, I'm just saying it. I'm not saying, how do I know? I don't know Aaron Judge, but I'm saying there's a very good possibility. There's a likelihood that Aaron Judge says, I'm from California. I'd like to play for the Giants or the Dodgers or the Padres. These are all big clubs who are going to offer him probably lots and lots of money. And all things being equal, there could be a chance that he says, I don't want to stay with the Yankees. People say like, no, he's a legend. He's a legend in New York. Why would he leave? Albert Pujols was a legend in St. Louis. He left. The world is replete with examples like that ever since the free agency era began. So I just think manager, World Series, those things, you could make an argument that if the Yankees win the World Series, Aaron Judge checks the box, says, I did it. I won a World Series with the Yankees. Now let me go do it with another team.
I have an intriguing deal for you. Think one moment. No one's proposed this. The Nationals call the Yankees and offer Juan Soto for Aaron Judge before the August 2nd trade deadline. And Washington lets it be known it's contingent on them signing Judge, and they're offering him a 10-year deal at $40 million a year. $400 million, which is going to be hard for Judge to turn down. 10-year deal, $40 million a year. And it's a 50-50 chance we agree that Judge and his reps might accept the deal, that if they were traded, they'd say, we'll sign that deal to go with Washington. None of the money deferred. And the Yankees know they'll have Juan Soto for 2 years after this year before he becomes a free agent, which he'll definitely become one under Scott Boras. But they'll also have him, like I said, 2 extra years. If you're the Yankees with the chemistry going on with Judge now in this World Series run going on, do you pull the trigger on that deal?
All right. If I'm the Yankees, I sit down with Aaron Judge and his agents, and I say, all right, listen, we have a chance to trade you straight up for Juan Soto. And we need to know your intentions. This is what we're going to offer you at the end of the year. Our top deal is X. Our top amount of years is X. Our top dollar is X. If we offer you that, will you resign? And if he says, nope, that's not good enough for me, then you say, okay, have fun. You're going to Washington. See ya.
Well, they got to know he's got to know, but Washington would not make the deal unless they knew they could sign Judge. So the Yankees and Washington would have to express to Judge he would be getting a 10-year deal with Washington. And the Yankees would tell Judge, you're not getting a 10-year deal with us. We'll maybe give you an 8-year deal. And over those 2 extra years. Guys, I can't help but think of Robbie Cano.
Mm-hmm.
He got extra money to go to Seattle, and dollar-wise, it was a good deal, even though he lost, a season's worth with the PEDs. So, 240 million 10 years ago to Seattle, as opposed to 175 to 7 to go to the Yankees. But he would have gone down as one of the great Yankees in history. If we would have been talking about the greatest second baseman in Yankee history, his name certainly would have been top of the list in the discussion. I mean, you're the Yankee historian. If Cano stayed and he kept producing the way he did after he left the Yankees, for the Yankees, would he have been the greatest second baseman in Yankee history?
I don't even think it's a question. And I'll tell you another guy. No one saw Andy Pettitte leaving the Yankees to go to Houston. No one saw that coming. All of a sudden, the Yankees are like, well, Andy Pettitte, we'll resign him. We'll resign him. And all of a sudden, they didn't resign him. Houston signed him. So there's many examples of guys like Cano, like Andy Pettitte. How about the Baltimore Orioles losing Mike Messina? How about that happening? That was just absurd. It never happens. But it does. Happens all the time. And if it happened with Messina and Pujols and Pete Rose and Dave Winfield and Robbie Cano, why couldn't it happen with Aaron Judge?
Don't get me started on Pujols. The Cardinals offered him a 9-year deal after he won the series. They didn't want to go 10 years.
Right.
And
what if the Yankees do the same
offered them
thing and the Giants offer him 10?
Yeah, so for one extra year, he cared more about grabbing the 1 year at the back end. I think he was given 24 years. So give me a break. Pujols did not care about legacy with the Cardinals. He cared more about the extra year.
And who says, how do we know that Aaron Judge cares that much about legacy in New York? That's my point. We all assume, well, because we all put ourselves in that situation. Well, they would say my name. They'd say Ruth Gehrig DiMaggio Semendinger. Yes. Like, I want that. But who's to say that even matters anything to Judge? Maybe Judge wants to say, they're going to say my name with A-Rod and Francisco Tatis, Fernando Tatis and whoever else as the highest paid guys of all time. That's what I care about. We don't know what he wants. And we don't know that if he did, that he would rather play in San Francisco or California. Maybe he wants to play in St. Louis. Maybe he would love to play in the nation's capital. Maybe all he cares about is $40 million a year for 10 years. We don't know that. We're going to find that out.
You're right. You make a great point, Doc. You look at Aaron Judge and we assume, oh, he loves being a Yankee. He wants to be a Yankee. And I don't want to hear the talk. Well, Aaron Judge says he wants to spend his whole career as a Yankee. Now he has a chance to prove it. What else is he going to say? I don't care who I spend my time with. And the next thing I love about these athletes, they say, no, it wasn't about the money. It's mainly about the money all the time. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'd love an athlete to come out and he's saying, well, they offered me more money. I mean, Johnny Damon did that. I like that. He said he went to the Yankees over the Red Sox because they offered $12 million more. And he bought a beautiful, gigantic house. And he said, with the extra money they offered me, it paid for the house. I love that honesty.
I absolutely get it. How much of a big deal would it be if, Aaron Judge says, you know what, you're not offering me enough money, and the Mets are the ones that offer him the money? How is that going to feel to everybody in New York, where Judge is now, because I know the fans look at it like, hey, you're a traitor because you decided to go with the money rather than the loyalty to the team. But ultimately, I mean, so does everybody else. If I got offered a couple million more to go work at another network, you know what? I'm going to that other network because although I get a lot of millions here, I'm going to wind up.
Wait! You're getting millions?
Well,
I got to talk to Mac. What's going on here?
I don't know this. I'm going to.
How much is Jack getting then?
What? I don't know. My
tens of millions.
I'm going free agent.
So he's got more years on his contract, but a lot of ops out.
I might be kind of like Michael Conforto, I might be a little like Joey Gallo at the end. You hear Scott Boras saying, "Oh, a number of contending teams, they're really interested in Joey Gallo."
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
They're Let me just say about Aaron Judge and the Mets. Like, if he goes to the Mets, then he goes to the Mets. I mean, he has no loyalty to me or to the Yankees or to the
Yeah.
fans. He's going to go where he wants to go. That's the beauty of free agency. And there's going to be a million reasons. Maybe he loves playing with Jacob deGrom, or maybe he loves playing with Michael Conforto. Maybe he wants to play with Pete Alonso, and that's what all he cares about. And so go play for the Mets. That's great.
Guys, no one realizes this. Jacob deGrom has 2 years on his contract after this season, but he's allowed to opt out at the end of this year. He's coming back to pitch pretty soon, in a week or so. If Jacob deGrom is lights out the rest of the year, shows he's healthy the rest of the year and is lights out, and he reestablishes himself as the best pitcher in all of baseball, there's going to be a major market for him. So the Mets are going to have to deal with the deGrom situation. And if they're going to re-sign deGrom, I know Steve Cohen's pockets are deep. I think it takes him out of play to pay a ridiculous amount of money. But then again, Steve Cohen, big Mets fan, the owner, has $14 billion. He can play around Steve Cohen and say, I'm willing to risk losing $1 billion in all my maneuverings, which other owners can't afford to do. And that makes him a very dangerous owner for the other teams. I mean, you have $14 billion. You could say, if I lose $2 billion of my net worth, if I have to do it to go all out for championship team, I'm going to do it. You know, if you had $14 billion, Doc, as much as you love the Yankees, if you were the owner, would you be willing maybe $2 billion out of your $14 billion to get the Yankees, you know, to the championship again? Would you be willing to take those risks?
Listen,
bold,
$2
billion of your $14 billion.
I can't understand those dollars. I've never had those dollars. I never will have those dollars. I would like to think that if I owned the Yankees, that I would be a kinder George Steinbrenner, but I would be willing to spend every dime I have to bring a championship to the Yankees every single year. That would be my philosophy. If I had the money, I'd max out as much as I could spend every year to bring the Yankees a world champion. But you made me think that I thought you were going to ask this, Jack. What if the Mets sign Aaron Judge and the Yankees sign Jacob deGrom?
I know.
Wouldn't that be something?
Wow. Yeah,
Well,
and the thing
I tell
about
you,
the Yankees would be better off as a team. That's the ironic thing about it. I mean, I want Judge to stay, fellas, because he's the face of the franchise. People identify, the Yankees with Judge. Kids go to the games. It's Aaron Judge. You need that one centerpiece guy. And as good as some of the other players are, there's only one Aaron Judge, one centerpiece. He's like bigger than life to the kids. And he's so important to the Yankees, the Yankee brand. You're not going to get anyone to really replace him so easily unless you get an Ohtani who somehow comes here. He could fill that void pretty, quickly. Otherwise, it's going to be hard.
I tell you, if deGrom opts out this year, look at the Phillies to grab him.
Steve Cohen won't allow it to happen.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Because ultimately, if deGrom opts out, I mean, deGrom's making. It's not like he'd be opting out with, they have no money. It's going to be short money. Obviously, he'd make a little bit more money, but he'd only be making a little bit more money. He's getting paid pretty well right now.
$27.5 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, so all right. So when you go up to $35 million, and we're only talking $7.5 million.
Trevor Bauer was offered $40 million a year with the.
There'd be no doubt in my mind that the Phillies would make it very difficult.
For 3 years, Trevor Bauer. I'm sorry, he didn't get that much.
The Phillies would make it very difficult. And I'd be willing to bet because now you're talking, a guy, the group that owns the Phillies, they have billions of dollars too. They may not have 14 billion, but they have billions of dollars. So making that jump and stealing deGrom in this rotation, if the Phillies had deGrom, they'd be a World Series contender right now. And I'm telling you, that's with the bullpen the way it is, at the pitching staff the way it is. You put deGrom on this team, and they are a World Series contender. That's a big deal, and that's the type of thing that the Phillies ownership has talked about it. They said if there was the one guy who would put us over the edge, that we would spend the money. deGrom is that guy. He would put you over the edge, as he would just about any team who's close. Imagine him on the Yankees right now. Imagine they spent that money on that instead of Gallo. This would be a ridiculous Yankees team. It could rival one of the best teams of all time.
I sometimes think of that teams get marginal players who are making decent money, not superstar money. And if you just get rid of 4 of them and save that money on a true superstar, I mean, you can get that impact player. So, but Zach Wheeler was a Met, and Zach Wheeler wanted to stay as a Met. And when the Phillies offered $23 million a year for 5 years, Zach Wheeler got back to the Mets and said, "Listen, if you match this offer, I'll stay with you." And they said, "Good luck to him,
Have fun at Philly."
He went to the Phillies and became an all-star. I mean, he was good with the Mets, but they weren't quite willing to go to the $23 million a year. But I bet if Steve Cohen was there, perhaps they would have. But you never know. They didn't with Michael Conforto. And then Michael Conforto got injured. They offered him 6 years, a total of $120 million. And now Conforto can't make his way back. Wow, he lost quite a sum.
Well, I love it when the Mets lose players because I'm such a Mets fan over here. That's one of my favorite teams. To beat up at least. Let's move on a little bit because you know how much I love talking about the Yankees. I'm still a little bitter from 2009. Just imagine if they didn't have all those good vitamins over there in New York, how that series might have changed.
I mean,
the Rams got their Super Bowl rings, and this happened last year with Atlanta and their World Series rings, how the top could either open up or be removed. And the Rams kind of took that ball and ran with it. And you can remove the top part of the ring, and inside you see the stadium where they played and stuff like that. Is that a good idea? And is that one of those things that just is like a novelty thing that kind of happened that's got started by the Braves, and now they're like, this is, we kind of dig this. And as a second part, we'll do 2 parts on this question here. The ring only shows the one Lombardi trophy. They do not show the second trophy that was won in St. Louis. Is that a good idea for a franchise to disregard what has happened in the past and say, you know what, we're not in St. Louis anymore, we're in LA, 1 trophy? Let's start with you, Doc.
All right, good. I'm just looking at pictures of the ring as you were talking. Listen, what happens with designs and rings and all this is every year they have to make theirs a little bit bigger and a little bit better and a little bit more bling or whatever and shinier and all that kind of stuff. So I whether the top can be removed or all that kind of stuff is really irrelevant to me. The Rams are a franchise, and I think when you're a franchise, you should pay respect to the other championships. So they probably should have that other Super Bowl trophy on there. Of course, if you're a team with millions of championships, whether that be the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Edmonton Oilers or the New York Islanders when they won 4 in a row and stuff, you can only put so many things on a ring, right? So if you honor the one season, then you honor the one season. But if the idea is the ring is supposed to honor the franchise, then they should honor the franchise, whether they played in St. Louis or LA or wherever they were playing at the time, especially a team like the Rams that moves. And, so many other teams have moved so much. So if you move, you're still part of that same franchise, right?
I agree. I'm a firm believer that they should have had the second Lombardi on there. I mean, this is their second stint in LA.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows that whether they're going to remain there. I mean, they could say in 10 years, LA still isn't coming out to watch us, that the Chargers are getting more fans than the Rams, even though they claim it's their house, and they could decide to move to Salt Lake City.
I disagree. I disagree with both of you. I'm going to tell you, it's a different city. It's a different community. An example would be the Baltimore Colts. They became the Indianapolis Colts. And when they won a Super Bowl, Peyton Manning was saying, well, I hope the old Baltimore Colt players could celebrate with us. Why? He's in Indianapolis. They have the same name, the Colts. The community in Baltimore was so tight-knit. It was less about the last name of the team than it was about the community. That's what these championships mean in a lot of cities. It's about community. It's not so much about the last name. Now, I understand Cleveland, the Guardians, and the Indians. Same thing, obviously, if you're in the same city. Basketball, if the Brooklyn Nets win the NBA title, they have a ring. You could put the ABA teams with Julius Erving, the New York Nets in there. I could understand because that's part of history. That's basically the same city. But, they went from St. Louis to LA. It's totally different. The people in St. Louis, do you think they were cheering for the Rams to beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl? I don't think they could care less who, was winning that game. Maybe they were even rooting against the Rams for leaving. Fans tend to do that. When their team leaves and goes elsewhere, how often do they root for the team? It's a funny thing. With the Brooklyn Dodgers, a lot of people rooted for them when they went to LA because they couldn't bring themselves to root for the Yankees, they hated Giants, so they had no choice. But when the Mets came into existence, why were the Mets so lovable? Why did they outdraw the Yankees? Because they had a new team. The Dodgers were no longer their team once they got the Mets because they left the city. I think it's much more about the city than it is the name. I mean, I don't think, the LA Rams have any link to the St. Louis Rams at all.
Well, I mean, other than the fact that it is the same franchise, I tend to agree with you. I would believe that there were more people in Detroit that were more excited for the Rams winning than in St. Louis. So, the big surprise was watching the tens of hundreds of people flood the streets of LA after the Rams won that Super Bowl. It was like a small little party, like a small little tea party after they won. So I mean, I can imagine LA really had they probably were more excited in Detroit than they were in LA about the Rams winning that Super Bowl just because of Stafford. But I am not a fan.
That's a little different. If one player is one of your own for all the years and you understand him leaving, and you have no hard feelings, you take a little something out of it when they win. Like Don Beebe, he was a member of the 4 Buffalo Bill losing Super Bowl teams the 4 years in a row. And then he goes to the Packers, and he's playing with Brett Favre, and they win the Super Bowl. The people in Buffalo were rooting for Don Beebe. He's kind of one of them, even though he had to go elsewhere. But this is different. This isn't a bigger scale. Fans are ticked off if their team leaves. You would be ticked off, Pax, if the Eagles left. If they went,
we had this threatened in the '80s when we were going up. When we had Norman Brayman here, who I scathe every time I have to mention his name, where he would threaten to take this team to Arizona and he was just a used car salesman from Florida who held the city at bay with this team. I'm glad he made his money. He ruined this franchise for a long time because he didn't want to offer Reggie White, a contract. That defense was great. I mean, it was an us against them mentality, even as far as the coach with Buddy Ryan. Buddy Ryan would malign the owner all the time because he knew that the owner was just cheap. And thank God that Jeffrey Lurie came in out of nowhere to buy this franchise. And that was right after Robert Kraft bought the Patriots, because Jeffrey Lurie really wanted the Patriots first and foremost because he was a Boston type of guy, and then wound up coming to Philadelphia after Robert Kraft bought the Patriots. But I hated hearing that. And it was like he threatened Philly over and over again. Oh, we're going to move to Arizona. We'll move another team here. The St. Louis team was going to move here. It was going to be the Philadelphia Rams and then the Arizona Eagles. And it was just ridiculous.
But let's say it happened. Let's take things to an extreme. This would never happen. Hypothetically, the Yankees moved to San Jose. Okay, hypothetically, it's not going to happen, of course. Doc, you're not going to wear a JY cap on your head and continue doing this Yankees show. I don't know whether you would pick up another team to be a fan of not or not. You probably don't know the answer yourself right now. It would just have to come to be, whatever. But you would no longer consider that team in San Jose a part. If they win another World Series, say, oh, we got the 28th, we're sharing in this. They're no longer part of that Yankee history.
If the Yankees left, I think they would leave behind a fan base that's angry. I mean, we have supported this team for a long time and paid some of the highest ticket prices and et cetera, in order to root for the Yankees. If they then, with all their millions and all their fan support, got up and left, yes, we would have every right to be angry and to stop being fans. Absolutely. But that's not happening. So
can I tell you something, guys?
Good.
This is unpopular, and this is me talking for myself. I'm not talking for both of you, but I'm not a fan of fans, okay? Because let me explain why. Fans are hypocritical. We're sympathetic towards the fans of a city when they lose their team. We're very sympathetic because in most cases, the fans that have supported their teams, we hate to see them lose their teams. And we're talking about other franchises, not the ones that, we're fans of. But if another franchise wants to come to them, they don't turn the other franchise away if they need one. They don't say, no, that's not right. Your fan base has supported you. We don't want you to come here. It's the wrong thing to do. Okay? They'll welcome any franchise from another city who has their heart broken, yet we're supposed to be sympathetic towards them if they lose their franchise. I just don't like the hypocrisy in the whole thing.
Well, for instance, as you're talking about this, the first thing that comes to mind is that the St. Louis Cardinals, the football team, was in St. Louis, and they couldn't keep it there because they didn't support. Then the Rams go there because we need to have a franchise in St. Louis, and LA doesn't support their teams either. And they go there, they win a world championship, and still the fans aren't really supporting them. As St. Louis is a baseball town first and foremost, and then maybe even a hockey town because it's a lot of blue collar there. But short of that, I mean, there's a reason why they don't have a basketball team, and there's now a reason why they don't have a football team, because they just cannot seem to get enough people to go out and support these teams. So can I say that people in St. Louis were upset when the Cardinals left? Probably not. Couldn't I say that they were upset when the Rams left? When the Rams left, the Rams weren't doing so hot. So, I mean, literally they were, they were a few years removed from the Super Bowl. And that's why, I was rooting for the Rams to win it because, I mean, Dick Vermeil. And Dick Vermeil still has really strong ties here. And all he did was take a team to the Super Bowl. He didn't even win it. So, but he has that championship game was more our Super Bowl. Beating Dallas in that championship game in 1980 is more revered than that Super Bowl ever would have been. So, but there again, when Philadelphia was rooting for Dick Vermeil, more so than they rooted for Andy Reid when he was going to win a Super Bowl with Kansas City. I feel that Andy Reid is not as well loved in this town as Dick Vermeil is. And hence that's why I'm going to the Hall of Fame to go watch him get inducted.
Nice.
And will I go there when Andy Reid goes? I'm not sure about that. But I don't know if Andy Reid's going to go as an Eagle. I don't expect him to go as an Eagle. I expect him now to go as a Chief. But
good point.
But that's what I kind of believe, and that's what I see. I feel that these cities that don't have the fan base that support them. I mean, there would be nothing. I mean, Jacksonville's talking about moving to Europe, but realistically, Jacksonville could move to St. Louis, and they wouldn't even need to move divisions because it would make sense for them to be there. And there's probably more fans in St. Louis than there is in Jacksonville, because Jacksonville has a hard time, getting anybody to go to that stadium ever. They do. You could say Duval County all you want, but Duval County doesn't have enough people. And Jacksonville is a military base. That's what that is. So there's a lot of transition going in and out of there. That's why they can't bring the people. That's why they go over to Europe and have those European games. Plus, I mean, of course, that the ties that the owner has to that, to those stadiums and those teams over there in soccer. But realistically, I mean, it wouldn't be anything for them to move to St. Louis. Would we be upset with the fans in Jacksonville? Would that be a big deal for them? I don't know that I'd be crying over the fact that they lost their franchise. They're the ones that not support. In Philadelphia, they were selling out stadiums all the time and have had sellouts nonstop. The waiting list to try to get to an Eagles game and get season tickets for an Eagles, I've been on the list for 20 some years. I've moved maybe 5,000 people. That just means 5,000 people died on the list. It doesn't mean that people are giving up their season tickets. So, I mean, and if a city is doing something like that and has that type of support, you're right, the team cannot leave. But you always hear that's why you heard Oakland leave. Like Oakland, oh, well, the team can't support it and we have to move to LA. And that's why you hear about the A's. They're a small market team. The owner of the A's is dying to move to Las Vegas because all of a sudden his rinky dink, $100 million franchise adds a zero and becomes $1 billion franchise. And I don't know that you should allow owners to try to increase their net worth, 100% or 1,000%, just because I want to move to a different city. So I don't like how the owners kind of deal with this, and I'm not a big fan of the NFL playing these types of games. However, I mean, it happens, and it's all about the money.
And it's easy for us to say because, you're a Phillies fan, we're Yankee fans and stuff like that. And we're in big markets and our teams have a lot of support. So I don't think there's much of a chance of any of these teams ever moving. So,
right. And that's why New York has.
Well, now Doc said a great point. If you've really supported the team, and if you're a Yankee fan, you've really supported your team. I mean, the Yankees have been supported wonderfully. So if they ever had the audacity to move, there would be incredible anger. The same way like with the Brooklyn Dodgers. But I'll tell you this, if the Yankees were ever going to move, it would have been in the early 60s, because if I'm the owner, I would have been ticked off to see all the empty seats in the stadium and then packing it in for the pathetic Mets. Okay? That would actually been a reason to move at that point, because that wouldn't have been too far after the Dodgers and the Giants moved. And I always wondered, if the Giants didn't follow the Dodgers, the Mets never would have came into existence.
That's correct.
So would the Giants have gone to Flushing eventually, and we would have had Willie Mays. We would have had some really, Juan Marichal. We wouldn't have had Seaver and the Miracle Mets. We turned out better with the Miracle Mets, the memories. But it would have been a happy time of baseball during that time. And you wouldn't have had the losing. In the 62 season when the Mets came into existence, there was the Giants playing the Yankees in the 7-game World Series. Imagine that was
what's kind of fun? I bet
Yeah.
you don't know this. On Start Spreading the News, I run this little series where I recount the Charlie Brown and Snoopy seasons by finding their old comic strips and putting them on there. And this is what they were saying. This is how they were playing in 1962. And these were the jokes and these were the strips and all that. There was that famous strip that came out after the 62 World Series, right? With Linus and Charlie Brown just sitting there silently, sitting for 3 panels. And then the 4th panel, Charlie Brown goes, and why couldn't McCovey have hit the ball even 3 feet higher, right? Because of the line out to end the World Series. That was in December of 1962. In January 1963, about 4 or 5 weeks later, Charles Schultz repeated that same cartoon. Same thing, 3 panels, Charlie Brown and Linus just sitting next to each other. And then the 4th one, he says, or even 2 feet higher.
Yeah.
See, now let me ask this question, just because if the Yankees were to move to Westchester, New York, just because they had a better deal for stadium rights and things of that nature, and just it makes things a lot easier, would there be an uproar about that?
I think so. I
Good
think
question,
in New
Doc.
York, you're thinking the Queens, Long Island area is more Mets fans, and the Bronx, Manhattan, New Jersey area might be considered more Yankee fans. I think New Jersey's probably split between Yankees and Mets, but I think if the Yankees go further away from Manhattan, they're sort of getting into Mets territory. If the Yankees were to move maybe to New Jersey, if they went to the Meadowlands, I don't know. I think it still feel yucky because they're the Bronx and that's where they belong.
Yeah, I mean, even though they would take a hit being the Bronx Bombers, they couldn't be called that anymore. I don't think it would be devastating. I think ultimately they could absorb the blow of going to Westchester or the Meadowlands because they'd be in close enough proximity for their fan base to go to the games. They wouldn't be like abandoning. We wouldn't be happy with the relocation, but it wouldn't be a team breaker for us as fans. It wouldn't be like they're moving. If the Yankees moved to Buffalo, I mean, that would be, they might even keep a huge part of their fan base, because technically it would be New York State. But that's an intriguing question. That's part of the reason the Dodgers moved to LA, because Robert Moses, who was in charge of the stadiums, wanted the Dodgers to move to Queens. He was going to build a whole beautiful complex in Queens, the Shea Stadium, the Dodgers could have technically played in. But Walt O'Malley said, how could we be called the Brooklyn Dodgers if we were playing in Queens? I would have proposed, don't tear down Ebbets Field and let us play a dozen games there a year. A dozen games, and come back on an occasion, preserve it as that landmark. And this way you could still keep the name Brooklyn Dodgers, even though you'd basically be visitors at that point. I would have tried to get that done. But
I think the problem was the stadium was not a good stadium. It was messy and ugly and dirty. And then, you run into these things where to keep it standing, that's going to cost lots and lots of money because it's infrastructure. And they couldn't keep it standing. And so that's why they had to move.
Yeah, but could they have been called the New York Dodgers instead of the Brooklyn Dodgers? Or could they have kept the name Brooklyn Dodgers and still played in Queens? In the beginning, they could have, but somehow it didn't have a good fit. But the Yankees to Westchester, I think they could absorb that hit. Doc, you have a book signing today, right?
That is correct. So
about it, because I know you're on your way to that. So
yes. So my wonderful Yankees book, The Least Among Them, which just won an award as the best sports book from an indie publisher in 2021. And it was in a book of the year for National Review from 2021. It's the story of the 29 Yankees whose entire career lasted of just one game. And then, of course, I extrapolate and tell other great Yankee stories in there. Anyway, today I'm going to be at the Babe Ruth Museum in Baltimore. That's why I'm in this hotel room, and I'm trying not to talk as loud as I normally would in deference to the people who might be sleeping next door. So I'm going to depart at this time and get ready for all that. And I want to thank you guys, and I'll see you back here next Saturday morning. But Mac, you're going to be on Jack, you're going to be on vacation?
No, I'm going to be here. Yes, the next couple of weeks I'm going to be on vacation. I had it put into my contract, and I
don't know about these contracts. We got millions on one side, vacation days on the other. I got to give credit. My agent is getting it done. If you're not happy with your agent,
hold
on. I think it's Scott Boras right here. Hold on, Scott. All right, gentlemen. I'll see you next week. Thank you,
Doc. Thank you very much, and we appreciate. See you next Saturday.
Take care, Doc.
All right, let's do a quick break. Right now seems like a good time to take a break, and we'll come back with right after these messages with the second half of the Mac and Jack show, debate show. We got some more questions to go over. I'm sure Jack and I can go for hours talking about some of this stuff. So we'll be back right after these messages.
The Hometown Foundation is excited to bring back the Dream Ride experience, August 26th to the 28th at Connecticut's Farmington Polo Club. Join us in celebrating the accomplishments of our Dream Riders while enjoying live music, a car and motorcycle show, family fun zone, pet adoptions, canine demonstrations, the Fireman's Chili Cook-Off, and much, much more. Get your tickets today.
My baloney has a first name, it's O-S-C-A-R. My baloney has a second name is M-A-Y-E-R. Oh, I love to eat it every day. And if you ask me why, I'll say, 'cause Oscar Mayer has a way with B-O-L-O-G-N-A.
Oscar Mayer, the first name in Bologna.
How's that?
You know, one of the best things about being an ex-big leaguer is getting freebies to the game. Call the front office, bingo. And once these fans recognize me, I probably won't even have to pay for my light beer from Miller. Down it! I love them. These fans know I drink light because it's less filling and it tastes great. Good seats, huh?
You're in the wrong seat, buddy. Come on.
Oh, I must be in the front row.
Come on.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
Good seats, hey, buddy? He missed the tag! He missed the tag!
When you drive to Wendy's and order a single, you get more beef than the Whopper or the Big Mac. At Wendy's, you never have to ask, where's the beef?
Anyone else?
My name is David, and in 8 years, I'll be an alcoholic.
Hi, David.
I'll start drinking in middle school, just at parties. But my parents won't start talking to me about it till high school. And by then, I'll already be in some trouble.
Kids who drink before age 15 are 5 times more likely to have alcohol problems when they're adults.
The thing is, my parents won't even see it coming.
So start talking.
Who's next?
Before they start drinking.
Supporting the needs of our veterans. That's the goal of all of us at Team AmVets. Like Mitch, Carlos, and Kevin from our Welcome Home team that brings furniture to our vets.
We are Team AmVets.
Or Linda from our thrift stores who brings you great bargains every day.
I am Team AmVets.
And John, who picks up your thrift store donations that support California veterans programs.
I am Team AmVets.
Visit our website or Team AmVets thrift store to donate or shop today.
Join the team!
The Hometown Foundation is excited to bring back the Dream Ride experience, August 26th to the 28th at Connecticut's Farmington Polo Club. Join us in celebrating the accomplishments of our Dream Riders while enjoying live music, a car and motorcycle show, family fun zone, pet adoptions, canine demonstrations, the Fireman's Chili Cook-Off, and much, much more. Get your tickets today.
See right now, without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about a team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboy fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready. I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face. Oh, I'm from Brooklyn. Hey, get any...
We are back with the Mac and Jack Saturday debate show, and we just lost the doc because he was in Baltimore getting a book signing, his #1 book signing. Heard it was a bestseller for independent writers. He definitely knows a lot about the Yankees.
29 Yankees who only played one game in their big league career. So there's a great story behind the 29 Yankees, you know, the one game they played, what they did, what became of them after. I read the book, you know, it was fascinating stuff. One of the Yankees he profiled, I'm sorry to say I forgot his name, but was on the 1964 team, and he played the last game of the season. The Yankees went to the World Series that year where they lost to the Cardinals in 7 games. But he played the last game of the regular season. It was extra innings, and he went 2 for 6. And he was a good minor leaguer throughout his career. So how did he wind up with only one game in his big league career? But you never know. You know, Pags, I saw this game. I went a couple of weeks ago to see the Long Island Ducks playing. Hey, mate, say hi to Jack for me from Sydney, Australia. Mario Tracy.
Andracchio. Yes,
Andracchio,
he's a big
sorry,
follower of
sorry
the
about
Eagles. So we are international today.
Sorry about mispronouncing the last name. They always leave out one letter when they spell my last name, so I know the feeling. It annoys me, so I apologize for the mispronunciation. But I saw the Long Island Ducks had a player called Lou Ford on the team. I didn't know anything about him, so But I saw him play before the pandemic. He's a natural hitter, and we Googled him. He played in the big leagues close to 20 years ago, and now he's around 40. He's 47 years old, and he can hit. And I saw him get 3 hits in the game, including a home run. He's a hitting coach / DH, and the guy can swing the bat at 47. I'm telling you, he can hit big league pitching, but he plays for the Long Island Ducks, and I guess he's playing for love of game because he was up at the big leagues for a little while before.
You know what? Some people just love playing the game. We like to, especially when they're professionals, where we believe that most Hall of Famers stay 2 years past their prime. That they maybe should have retired 2 years prior, and how far along do you stay before it starts to affect the fact that you had a Hall of Fame career? But you don't get this to determine. I'm real big on not making sure that I don't ever tell anybody else how they should live their life. And although I can be critical of how they're doing it, they're the ones that are going to have that desire. They're the ones. Hey, Rocky made 6 movies. That 6th movie, Rocky Balboa, was that he still had stuff left in the tank or left in the basement that he had to get rid of to be able and just get the fight out of him, because he still had some of that fight left in him. And who is to say that these players still don't have that fight in them? That's why they choose to continue to play. I think that it has nothing to do with anything other than, with even Tom Brady, that he has nothing to prove to anybody. He just can't get away from the game while he's still able to play it. And who is anybody to say that he
Wait. I disagree with you. It depends on the sport. Baseball and basketball, let players play as long as they want. Tim McCarver, I remember he once said he doesn't think a player should be told to retire. He likes them to scratch and claw and try to stay in the show as long as they can. He likes seeing something like that, and I'm good with that. If you take a guy like, let's say, Derek Jeter, we have the documentary now, The Captain. He announced before his last season that was going to be it. And when he made the announcement, he was still an elite player, at shortstop. And his last year, he hit in the 250s, and that was the year he declined. He wasn't an embarrassment, but he declined by a lot. Let's say Derek Jeter told the Yankees, look, I love being here. Pay me $1 million a year. I'll be the backup shortstop. I like being on the roster. I could be an occasional fill-in. Am I good enough to be a backup? And they might say, yeah, but Derek, where's your dignity? Like with Balboa holding the spit bucket. And he might say, don't worry about that. I just love being a part of the team, an active participant. And he probably could have squeezed out, another year, 2, or whatever the amount. Mariano Rivera, let's say he retired basically at the top of his game. Let's say his skills started to decline. He might say, am I good enough to be a middle relief pitcher? Am I good enough to hold down a roster spot? Even LeBron James. When LeBron James starts slipping a lot, he's still going to be good enough to hold a roster spot, even as a backup, let's say. But guys don't do that once they've been at a high level. But the point is, it depends on the sport. Now, football and boxing, I would tell a guy to retire. Boxing, I tell him to retire. Because even if you can perform at top level, you're getting hits to the head. It's going to take a toll. So why I would try to convince a guy to retire, not hang on, even if he's still good at a certain point, is because of what's going to take place years down the line by staying too long. And that's what concerns me with Tom Brady. Yes, I believe he could still play at an elite level. And he's shown it. but he's getting hit. Maybe for quarterbacks, it's not as bad as other positions, granted. But you're getting into the 40s, you don't need to get the jolts and the hits. Okay, that would be the argument I would make.
Well, no, and I agree with you there. I mean, so we're talking about this. Let's talk about Jaromir Jagr, who is 47 years old and still playing hockey at a fairly elite level over in the Czech Republic. I mean, he played on the Flyers in Boston and New Jersey. I mean, he was floating around at 43, 44 years old. Went to go play over in the Czech Republic. You had some rookie or some young kid who was trying to make a name for himself go a little bit high on him and wound up, putting him in a coma for a couple of days, I believe, they put him on a medically induced coma because of the concussion he received, and ultimately he's still playing hockey. He's still doing his thing there. And once he came back, he's still out there playing. Then you talk about, we talk about getting up into years. I mean, Gordie Howe, he had a one-day contract at over 60, at 62 years old, where they had all his kids play on. They had like one-day contracts for all of the Howes to play on one team as something that was kind of fun. But he was still in shape enough to still be skating at 62 years old. I don't know that he would have been able to play. Obviously, I can't imagine that he was in game shape, but he was playing hockey into his 50s as well. So there are some times where that does work. And of course, again, Brady is like an anomaly, obviously. But then I think of Testaverde. Testaverde was a quarterback until he was 42 years old. May have been a backup.
Are
Now,
you getting the hits? It depends on the position and the sport. You're getting the hits to the head. In boxing, you get it on a regular basis. In football, in most positions, you're getting it on a regular basis. Look, if a guy's a field goal kicker and he could kick to age 60, I'm not going to tell him to retire because he can't afford to get the hit, this or that. Of course, it's possible he could get hit at one point, but you're not getting the continuous hits that are really likely to affect you down the line.
Right. And it's like I'm not saying that even Brady just getting knocked to the ground is going to be a rattle. That's why you start talking about with these kids, you can't shake babies at all. Like you don't want to bounce them on your knee and stuff like that because that stuff actually is affecting. Same thing with somebody who's in their 40s now. If you keep getting knocked to the ground, that even though you may not be hitting your head, you're shaking a little bit. So it's definitely a little bit more than just your average everyday. Let me just jump up and down and shake like that. No, you're getting knocked around, and eventually that's going to start to affect you, especially with the CTE right now. There's a lot of NFL players that are affected by this, and it's
the head going back and forth like this from all the doctors I've talked to, neurosurgeons, doesn't affect it. It's like the trauma. You get a hit hit hard in the brain, like swims, like the impact. Okay, that would be the thing. But it depends on the sport.
Yeah, because I mean, I think of George Foreman. George Foreman was boxing into his 40s. However, I felt that boxing was not at its, in its heyday.
It catches up to you later in boxing. That's the thing about it. Someone could show no ill effects and think they escaped it, and then 20, 25 years later it could show up.
I mean, unfortunately, Muhammad Ali obviously is the poster child for all of that, where he was just, he was great up until the point where he wasn't, and then could barely speak towards the end of his life. It was just way too much for him.
Ray Robinson, same thing. I mean, it punches the greatest fighters. It's had like a big effect on.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate, and that's but that's why they made so much money back then. To be able to do that, it's
well, you have to know when to draw the line and when to get out, and it's a very hard thing, very hard.
I can believe that. So, and never really boxing professionally. I just know that after a certain amount of time, I'm tired of getting hit in the face.
Yeah.
But let's go back to our debate questions. The next question that we have, and this is a fairly interesting one. This goes on the opposite side of things. Juan Soto just turned down $440 million from the Nationals. Now, normally I would say, hey, listen, is Juan Soto worth it or whatever? But let's go the opposite way with this. The fact that he turned down $440 million from the Nationals, do you feel that that's going to have an adverse effect to that franchise where players may not want to go there because somebody as high profile as Juan Soto is deciding not to sign with them?
No, players make the best deal possible. Look, the Nationals didn't sign Bryce Harper. He went to your Phillies. For whatever reason, it never got worked out. It should have got worked out at some point in time, even a couple of years before Harper was a free agent. He should have gotten a big deal from the Nationals. But the year he leaves the Nationals, next year, the Nationals win the World Series without Harper. So did it hurt the Washington national team? No. Did it hurt their franchise? Perhaps, because Harper, I don't know, was he the face of the Nationals franchise? I'm not sure about that. Washington never fully embraced him the way you think they, should have. But the point is, they won the World Series without him. But sometimes these are business deals. Washington let Anthony Rendon go to the Angels, because it was an exorbitant amount of money. Rendon wasn't worth what the Angels were willing to pay, and it's played out favorably for the Nationals not doing that re-signing. The problem now with the Nationals being a destination, they're not good. They're in the cellar. Washington, how do I put this? I don't want to insult the people of Washington because it's obviously a great city. It's our nation's capital, but it's not a destination place for an athlete to want to live at. Miami's a destination place. New York's a destination place. Los Angeles is a destination place just to live there. And athletes are human beings. I mean, you're a Philadelphia guy. If you got drafted by the Phillies, you'd be ecstatic because that's your hometown, okay? But if they have a choice to go to a destination city or Washington to live, they're not going to want to go to Washington unless they have roots there, okay? Which in most cases they don't. So, yeah, I think it does become hard. And they also think about winning to an extent. And they think Washington, they're like nothing. They're not like a good team. And it does become harder. So what a team like Washington does, they have a do-over. They'll trade Soto for some excellent prospects. I mean, there's some talk linking Soto with the Yankees. But the Yankees would be smart not to, and apparently they're not going to trade their best prospect in the system, their shortstop, Anthony Volpe. Because Anthony Volpe could be, I hate to say the next Derek Jeter, but let's say the next great Yankees shortstop, okay? And you want a guy like that who might be there his whole career with the Yankees for, we know Anthony Volpe. And that position's taken, and he might turn out to be ultimately more valuable to the Yankees than Soto maybe ever could have been. And Soto is only going to be there 2 years after this one, unless you sign him for a ridiculous amount of money. $500 million can make El Paso seem like that. Yeah, any franchise, listen, can get any player if you're going to blow the opposition away with your offer. If you give them an offer that's so much greater than anyone else, they'll go anywhere. A case in point, who would have linked Carlos Correa to the Minnesota Twins? I mean, when you think of it, Correa is there maybe on a temporary visa. He signed a 3-year contract with the Twins at $35 million a year. But Scott Boras is his agent. It was a smart contract because Correa could opt out after this year. He could opt out after next year, and he's a free agent the year after that. So worst case scenario for Correa, if everything collapses, if he forgets how to hit and he forgets how to field, and his big league career comes to an end, he's got $105 million. So no one is going to have to hold any benefits for him, the rest of his life. And so an athlete is going to go anywhere, based on the contract they're going to give them. But Washington, apparently, they don't want to give out the crazy contracts. The Soto contract wasn't a crazy contract from Washington's viewpoint. Consider it's 15 years. That's a little over $29 million a year. And they're banking on Soto to be a star. At the very least, he's going to be a good player. So the contract's not going to be a bad one in their view. And it would have given Soto that great security. But for Soto, he's probably looking $29 million a year average. That doesn't do it for me. If Washington was offering him $35 million a year for 15 years, I'm curious whether Scott Boras would have said, let's do the deal. Scott Boras definitely $40 million a year for 15. He might not have even done that unless he had opt-outs, because Scott Boras, I'd never deal with him, but I got to give him credit for being a smart man, because Pags, we don't know what the market is going to be 5-10 years from now. So we might say, oh, it's all this money. So you want to opt out, because sometimes there's a new market that comes into being where guys are getting paid $50 million a year. And so those 29 and 29.3 doesn't look like it's that much.
Right. Then again, I look at it like where, for instance, Scherzer is getting paid more money this year than the entire A's and Rays franchise. Yeah, that they have. He's getting paid more money specifically. At what point do they cap these? Now,
Scherzer has $130 million for 3 years, and he has an opt-out. I think it might be after the second year.
Possibly. Why would you opt out? Do you think somebody else is going to give you $50 million?
You know why I'll opt out?
Possible.
Because if he has a great second year, a great second year, he could tell the Mets this. Okay, either you add on to this contract, give me 2 more years, I'm becoming a free agent, and someone else is going to sign me for 3 years.
Well, I mean, and that's where, Scott Boras was the one that started this option out, where he tried to get Bryce Harper to do this. And he said it really at the press conference. He goes, I was the one that invented this opt out, where we can opt out of this. However, the team doesn't ever work the opposite way, where the team gets the option to opt out, where they could, that, hey, if you opt out, it's one thing, but we want to maybe have an option to opt out as well. They don't ever do that. It's always guaranteed the one way, but not the other.
Chris Sale had, in my view, terrible agents when he was with the White Sox. These guys were the worst. They gave the team 2 options to basically opt out of the contract. Can you believe that? 2 options to opt out. I don't think Harper took the opt out. I think Harper decided he did not
take any option out. It became there's a no trade clause. In fact, he said he wanted to end his career with one team, that the money, at one point he said that the money doesn't matter anymore. Whether you make 25, whether you make 30, whether you make 35, you can't always think the grass is greener. And that's part of the problem of some of these agents now with baseball, is that the grass is greener in a couple of years, because obviously that person's making more money and that person's making more money. And although I might have been the highest paid player at one point, I'm not the highest paid player now, and it's an ego thing. So that's where I kind of feel that it goes back and forth a little bit, where I'm not a big fan of these opts. That if the player gets an option, then the team also should be able to get an option at some point as well, where maybe it's all right, if you decide not to take the option, the next year I get the option. And you alternate back and forth, because, hey, if you stink out loud, now all of a sudden I'm stuck paying your bill. But if you're great, you're going to decide to leave us. It doesn't quite work that way. It's always the loyalty in the one direction, not the other.
It's not loyalty, it's smart, but the players hold a little bit of the leverage, because especially as they get older and they still have something left for a couple of more years. They have the team over barrel. CC Sabathia used that with the Yankees. He kind of had an opt-out. So they added, I think, a couple of years onto his contract. And at the tail end of it, he didn't have it anymore. So, but I wouldn't give him an opt-out. The Yankees might do that with Aaron Judge. If they do sign Aaron Judge, I don't believe they will get it done, the deal done with Aaron Judge, but they might. But if they do, they're certainly going to have to add in probably a couple of opt-outs. They might re-sign Aaron Judge for 7 years, 8 years, or whatever. And then after 2 more years, he'll have an opt-out. Then after another 2-3 years, have another opt-out. It's, it's just the way it is. Someone made a comment, the Mad New Yorker, well, Scherzer isn't Flushing. It's not Miami. It's New York. He's pitching for the New York Mets. He's pitching in a glamour city for a glamour franchise. It might not mean much to Scherzer because let's remember, he pitched for Detroit and Washington throughout his career. So those aren't the glamour cities per se, for athletes that they're going to want to go to. Listen, the athletes love like the Florida cities to go to because the weather's always going to be good. Maybe not for baseball players during, this time of season of September, but there are a lot of there are a lot of restaurants. They have things, to do. It's a good feeling being around certain cities. But for other athletes, it's concentration, but there's a difference between, let's say, Miami and Buffalo, which Buffalo's maybe a great place, to live if that's your type of lifestyle you like, okay, over there, as opposed to the nightlife, because the Buffalo nightlife isn't going to compare to the Miami nightlife. I mean, I don't think I'm insulting anyone in Buffalo by saying that, or the Manhattan nightlife.
Right, obviously. But I begin to start to think that as much as baseball is trying to do a little bit with parity and trying to get more teams into the playoffs, get some of these smaller markets the ability to get into the playoffs because they know that they aren't able to compete with teams like the Yankees and the Mets and the Dodgers, who are spending, upwards of over $200+ million a season to put a baseball team out on the field. I mean, how does a team like, the A's or the Rays? I mean, the Rays have been doing well. They have in the past. I just feel like as they continue to go further down the line, that they are not going to be able to compete anymore, that they are becoming obsolete, and that you have teams like Cleveland. I mean, when Cleveland was there, in 97?
Yes, they can compete. I mean, the whole key is signing the players early on, not waiting and waiting and waiting like the Yankees did with Aaron Judge. The Yankees could have made Aaron Judge a Yankee for life, but they kept having these concerns. Oh, is he going to be injury prone? Let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. And the more they waited, the closer he was getting to free agency. I would not have let him get within 1 year free agency. You know what that is when you get within 1 year free agency, Pax? You sing the finish line if you're a player. And the finish line is free agency, meaning you can go wherever you want. It's like a single guy going into a nightclub. He could have any woman there he wants. Let's say they all like the guy. So, it's... I mean, I don't know if that's a good example, but I'm trying to give with Aaron Judge. You'll have all these teams that are going to want him on his team, and a few of them are going to come up with offers that he'd be happy with, and at least one of them is going to come up with an amazing offer to him. He's letting them bid against one another. What a feeling that is, becoming a free agent. And there are rarities, as Jose Ramirez, the infielder for the Indians, a super player, would have been a free agent at the end of the year. He signed a 5-year deal for $24 million a year. He loves being a Cleveland Indian, absolutely loves it. And all along, he kept telling his agent, is it enough money? Is it enough money? He wanted the deal to get done. And finally, against his agent's wishes, he signed the contract. He says, I don't care. I love playing for Cleveland. And listen, you're not going to cry for a guy getting $120 million. $24 million a year. But his agent also knows that if he didn't sign with Cleveland, instead of $24 million a year, chances are he could have gone
30 or 35.
gotten close, maybe $30 million a year for 7 years, $210 million as opposed to $120 million. Even though he might make the money up later on, he might make it up. But Ramirez didn't care. He loved being an Indian, and it's a tough, it's a tough thing, to say. But Washington, yeah, they can reboot. They can build through the system. They've shown a willingness to spend money. What's ever happened to Steven Strasburg? They signed him for big bucks, $35 million a year after the World Series. I forgot how many years. I think it was like 5 years. And he became injury prone. He's a non-factor. So that shows you what a bad signing it turned out to be, even though I wasn't totally against it at the time because they were kind of rewarding him as being a World Series champion, a homegrown product. I don't knock a team for rewarding a homegrown product who's brought them a championship, but it didn't turn out to be a good signing.
Well, no, and I mean, I feel like Washington kind of caused that. Let's put him on these pitch counts. Let's put him on. We're going to shut him down after he gets to 120 innings at that 1 year after he was out for most of the first year. They shut him down after 120 innings instead of letting him pitch out. And they were on a little bit of a run. They're like, nope, we're shutting you down because we're thinking long term. The next year he pitched all season long. They won the World Series. And since he's won the World Series, and since he signed that contract, how many games has he pitched?
But I got to tell you, there's a funny thing behind that. We mentioned Scott Boras. He's Steven Strasburg's agent. The year they won the World Series, Strasburg was on a pitch count where they worked along with Scott Boras, his agent, to keep the pitch count at a certain amount, to keep him healthy, to keep his value up as a free agent. And Scott Boras showed a degree of loyalty, because he realized the organization worked along with him hand in hand. So he gave them the right of first refusal. They were going to come very close to matching anyone else's offer when Strasburg was a free agent. He was going to go back to the Nationals. He wasn't going to go elsewhere because they wanted to show some loyalty to the Nationals. Not a tremendous amount. If the Nationals would have been 20% under what another team was playing, Strasburg would have been gone. But they were relatively even the amount of money they were going to lay out with anyone else. So he made it a point, Scott Boras and Steve Strasburg, to know, look, these guys worked along with us, and now we're going to come back with us because we kind of have a partnership here. But so much for the goodwill, because the Nationals wouldn't show the plane for Juan Soto, Scott Boras started attacking the national organization.
Well, and I know that the Nationals are trying to sell the team, and I can imagine that once they trade Soto, because they will trade him, they will not let him get to free agency. He's worth too much in the opposite direction to receive a haul. So I can imagine that it's probably not going to get done before the trade deadline. However, it will get done in the offseason.
I think Juan Soto will be traded before the trade deadline. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if they trade him to a contender before the trade deadline, the contender has him for the postseason. And if they can't re-sign him, a contender has him for 2 more postseasons. That's the intriguing thing with the New York Yankees. If they get Juan Soto at a very heavy price, they have him for the next 3 postseasons. Even if he leaves.
Only two postseasons.
No, this year, and there's 2 more years on this contract after this one. That's 3 postseasons.
Oh, I thought he was a free agent in the 2024 season.
No, he has 2 more seasons after the 2024 season. He's a free agent.
Okay, I'm gonna go confirm that. But
yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm correct there. But
okay.
He has, so you have him for 3 postseasons. But to me, it's not worth giving up Anthony Volpe, who's your stud shortstop, about to come up, your heir apparent to Derek Jeter, it's not long enough. I mean, I understand 3 postseasons. If you had Juan Soto for 6 years, you think of it a little more. I just wouldn't do it. I mean, as intriguing as it is, I just can't see a deal they could put together for Juan Soto. I just can't see it.
Yeah, and I don't know of a team that really has the specifics to be able to use him. The only team that I think of that might actually have the haul to give back to Washington would be like the Rays because of their minor league. However, the Rays are only going to use him so he's a free agent after 24. Okay, so he does.
It's 3 postseasons. That's why it's important for a team that's serious about him to get him before August 2nd, because they'll have him for this postseason where he could be a difference maker. But what do you exactly give up? I mean, it's easy to say Yankees will get Soto. That sounds good. Washington doesn't have to trade him this year. Let's say they held on to him after the deadline, okay? He's with the Nationals the rest of the year. You could trade him in the offseason, and any team getting him is going to have a minimum of 2 years, and maybe they'll feel they could sign him. I mean, maybe the Mets come in on him at the end of the year. They work out some type of deal and give him the astronomical type of money, instead of $440 for 15 years, Steve Cohn goes $560 for 15 years. Like, can you imagine you're paying a guy $40 million a year, let's say, hypothetically, and you're giving him a 15-year contract because you figure Soto's going to be a superstar. He'll be 38 at the end of that time. That's $600 million at $40 million a year. And Steve Cohn has shown that boldness that, it's not beyond comprehension to think he could give him a $600 million deal for 15 years, a straight $40 million a year.
Why wouldn't he just give him 5% of the team? It's like, hey, listen, hey, we're going to give you ownership of the team. Now you get 5% or 6%, 10%, cut of the team. I mean, because ultimately that's what's happening. It's $600 million. I mean, the franchise itself is only worth, like, the Mets will call it at $1.5 billion, maybe $2 billion at most. I mean, these franchises are raising in price exponentially. But even at that, that's still at $2 billion. A $600 million contract is
it's $40 million a year for 15 years. So it's the money is stretched out. You're not giving him $600 million a year. And as we said earlier in the show, Steve Cohn's net worth is $14 billion. He himself can take a bath with the Mets. Can you imagine Steve Cohn? You can't lose $10 billion unless you're absolutely ridiculously throwing the money away, like you're gambling it away. But even if Steve Cohn lost $10 billion, which is unthinkable, which would never happen, he still have $4 billion left. The man can live a heck of a life. The man can lose $13 billion and get out of sports, get out of business, and just chill out on $1 billion. And live luxuriously, basically. Get the biggest house, play golf, do this, chill out,
Be living like you do.
Yeah, well, he could.
That's why I need your money. That's why I need your money, Jack. It's hard to keep a house looking like this.
I sometimes think if these guys have to live our lifestyle, I mean, would it be the equivalent of them living in poverty? If they all of a sudden were deprived of all these material extras that they have in life, would that be the equivalent of living in poverty? Not just being able to order anything you want without thinking of the price, without looking at a restaurant menu and saying, wow, this is a little on the expensive side. This juicy steak that's like $90. I think I'm going to get a cheaper steak for like, $30. They don't have to think that way, okay? You
Right,
kind
right.
of like one that can how they would make that adjustment.
I'm sure certain players absolutely have to do that. There's plenty of players who are uh, not smart with their finances. I mean, think of Kurt Schilling. All the money that he made and blew just on, hey, I'm going to come up with a new video game, and that guy just kind of stole all of his money, and now he's like crying poor. And then of course he can't keep his mouth shut to keep a job. So obviously, at what point it's like he's signing autographs for money and doing with things that he doesn't want to have to do, like deal with the public because he's not the nice guy in the world. But
But
and
was Schilling
that's
bad? How was Schilling dealing with the public during his prime? Was he okay with that or not, or what?
no, he was always kind of abrasive. It was the way that he did things is just always a little
Well,
on edge.
let me tell you about another Philadelphian, a pure Philadelphian, Bernard Hopkins, okay? Former great middleweight champion of and I think he lives in Delaware right now, but he's a Philadelphian in heart.
Right,
He
right.
lived there during the prime of his career in his youth. Bernard Hopkins was talking to me about money, the money he was making, and he made a substantial amount during his long ring career, enough for financial security. He told me the key to him having security as accountants is not making investments, a whole bunch of them, living conservatively off, a certain amount of interest, not going looking for these deals where he could make a fortune of money. People come to him and he never invests in that. I mean, very conservative investments his accountants do. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but the very safe ones that aren't going to make him a fortune, but he knows he's not going to lose money and make it on that. And he also, about Bernard, he told me this many years ago too. And I love this about him. When he was in his heyday, making big money, he'd go to Costco. He would cut out the coupons to get some money, off the items he was getting. He would take a look at the circular. Oh, I can get this cheaper. I give him tremendous credit for that. Some people might say, oh, Bernard is so cheap, he cuts coupons out. No, Bernard is so smart to do something like that.
Well, not only that, I mean, I think that grounds you some. That you remember your roots. Hey, listen, Bernard Hopkins he wasn't born with that money. So he
Yeah.
remembered what it was like, where, I mean, he came from West Philadelphia, I believe. It was tough living there. It's like there were times when I'm sure he was hungry, you know what I mean, where it wasn't the same growing up back then. So he didn't have the money. So once you get the money, you can go and do and be just be extravagant and do all those things. And some of these players do that. That's why you see some of these NFL players are broke. Like Allen Iverson, same type of situation. Allen Iverson made all of that money. He's now become more spendthrift. He realized that he can't go. You can't be making $10,000 a day and spending 15. You have to have some type of balance with all of that. And he learned later in life, and luckily he made some of those deals like with Reebok and his brand, that he was able to go ahead and make some of that money. But when he was making commercials because he was trying to be able to fund some of his lifestyle still at 40 plus years old, doing appearances where he was getting paid $20,000 to $25,000 to make that appearance because he needed the money. That was more spending money for him because he didn't really have the assets to be able to do the things that he wanted to do.
Look at Evander Holyfield. I don't want to say Holyfield wound up broke, but he wound up with, at best, Holyfield is like a middle class at best. And this is a guy who, in his heyday, when he's making the big money, he bought a 96-room home in Atlanta. Who the heck needs 96 rooms? And one thing about these athletes, anyone, when you have the money and you have a home, why don't you just pay it off all at once? Why carry a mortgage? And then these guys, they don't deal with taxes the right way. But getting back to Holyfield's 96-room home, you know how expensive that is to maintain? And who the heck needs something that big? Does he have 96 people, one in each room living or whatever? It's
I'm sure there's rooms he's never been to. There
right?
are
A
rooms at
bowling
nice.
alley has a bowling alley in there, movie theater. Listen, you got the money like a LeBron James. You can have an extravagant home. I mean, you should to an extent. I'm not knocking that, okay? But you can treat yourself once in a while to something as a splurge. I can understand it and respect that, but it can't be like every day is the splurge, the way they're spending. I mean, it's got to be kind of like a planned splurge. Look, I have a fortune. I'm treating myself to an extra expensive car. Okay? That's fine, but not a fleet of very expensive cars lying there, like the 8 cars. Like they need 8 cars, taking up their driveway where they're going to alternate the 8 of them. It's
Oh, well, that's
absurd.
Ben Simmons. That's Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons spending the money. That's why he was crying about not getting paid. That's like, hey, I'm going to sue the Sixers because they're not paying me because I signed this contract, and if I sign the contract, that means I got to live to, they got to live to that contract. Doesn't matter whether I'm paying or playing or not, and what have you. That's because he was spending extravagantly. He loved what basketball could give him, but not what he could give back to basketball. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the game that he was playing. So, some of these players don't deserve the money that they're getting. I understand, hey, listen, get what you're worth, and if somebody's going to pay you that money, then you're worth that money. But ultimately, I do not feel that these players are worth the money. Like, you know, I don't think any baseball player is worth
No, I don't begrudge.
440 million dollars. But
I don't. If an entertainer can get it, then a player should, an athlete should too, because athletes are entertainers at the end of the day.
right, but I don't think any movie star should make that either. However, everything's about the money, and if a movie's bringing in $1 billion, then I guess the
Someone's got to
actors who
get
are
the
doing that.
money. Someone
Yeah,
has got to get the money, okay?
correct.
So if it's bringing it in, yeah.
Yeah, so let's move on from the money talk. We've been talking about money all day today. Let's talk about something a little different. I would talk about Kyler Murray, but that's more money too, and I ain't interested in doing that. So let's talk about Devin Allen. Devin Allen last Sunday was disqualified from the 110-meter hurdles finals
In the World
because
Championships.
in the World Championships, because he reacted to the gun 1/1000th of a second too early. And the debate question is the 1/10 of a second reaction time in track and field, and this is not just for the hurdles, this is also for all of these races, so if you're doing the 220 or the 440, if you're doing relays, if you when you hear the gun, you have to react at a tenth of a second, and that shows that you are audibly hearing the gun instead of guessing when the gun's going to get shot. However, 1/1000th of a second at 0.099, and they disqualified him. It's the first time ever that somebody has been disqualified at so close.
No, it's not the first time. No. Usain Bolt was actually disqualified too for the same
But
thing.
he did it at a 0.84, something like that. He was.
Oh, I don't know the amount. Right. Oh, okay. The time wise.
Yeah. So he was 0.16. And I'll do this before you start talking, Jack. I did a little bit more research on this, and there was a study done with 12 of the most the fastest runners and the ones who deal with this in a very specific way, and they tested all 12. All 12, and they didn't do it with a gun, they did it with headphones. So there was no shooting of a gun where you could anticipate. They had to be able to react off of the audible noise itself. And all 12 were able to beat the tenth of a second time. And some of them, I think the fastest was a 0.068. So now I got to imagine not everybody's going to have the same type of ears, and not everybody, you have a lot of crowd noise, and that's going to play a factor in this as well. And then I have to think of also the calibration of this equipment, where it was 0.099, but it only went to 3 decimal points. What was that 4th decimal point? Was that a 7 or was it a 2? because at that point, or was it 0.0986 and they rolled it up to 0.099? That's where I have some of the issue, because if you're going to disqualify somebody who's training for 4 years, he stayed out of football and trained for 4 years to become the best hurdler in the world, and now he's not even going to get the opportunity to compete for the Olympics because of the fact that he was disqualified in this race.
Well,
Now,
he
a race that he
competed
was
in the
likely going to
Olympics.
win.
No. During these 4 years, he's been competing in international events. Okay, competed in the Olympics before this. It's not like he waited 4 years for this specific event.
Right.
He delayed coming to training camp for the Philadelphia Eagles, where he has a shot to make the team as he's yet another wide receiver. And obviously, he's going to be a speed burner, okay? A rarity, a wide receiver who's a speed burner, who's the quickest guy on the team,
Actually,
So,
I look at him as probably being on special teams. There's two places I think that he would be. One, returning kicks. Two, I think that he's going to be a shooter towards the punter, where he'd be able to rush the punter and maybe block some kicks.
And
Because
what's
he's got that type of
interesting
speed.
too, hurdling is actually allowed in the NFL. Can you imagine a guy trying to tackle him? The advantage he has, like hurdling. But I think teams will be ready for him. Hurdling might not be a good idea for him, especially. They figure he's going to hurdle over me. He's not going to embarrass me. They're going to think in the open field. If maybe he could get away from me, but he's not jumping over me. It's the equivalent of a guy dunking on someone else. They don't want to be put on a poster by him. But getting back to what you're saying, okay, so Devin Allen from the University of Oregon, he's always come a little short of, getting the medals in elite competition like this. But he's run a couple of phenomenal times under 13 seconds for the 110-meter hurdles. He is world class. He would have had a decent chance of medaling in the world championships, maybe possibly winning the gold, possibly in this particular thing. You never know what type of race he'd run. He qualified for it barely, finishing in third place 3 weeks before at the trials. Barely by like about 100th of a second. He snuck into the third position, didn't have his best race, but he made the team. Maybe he would have had his best race here. Maybe he would have won the gold even. We don't know. The question is the fairness of it. They used to, in the past, not disqualify an athlete who'd line up who would false start a little early. I mean, unless he did it twice. In the past, they were allowed one false start. And that wasn't working, because if you're ready to begin and you're an athlete, your mind is set 100% into the start of the race. And all of a sudden, you have to start over. You lose something mentally. You're at the start. You're waiting for the gun to start the race. False start. You have to come back. False start. You have to come back. Now another athlete false starts. And it's going on forever, especially if you're allowed one false start. You can gamble and take off. I'm not going to get disqualified, especially if you're not a favorite and your best chance is getting a quicker start. You're going to gamble. So I understand this rule. One false start in your history. I have a better rule than that, a better proposition. It's too harsh to disqualify guys on a false start where they barely false started. Let them start 6 inches behind us, something like that, okay? Reset their position, have there be a little mark that they're allowed to continue the race, but they're moved back just a tiny bit. That would discourage them from, intentionally false starting, like gambling on a false start. If they know they're going to have pushed back just a tiny bit on the next go round. And then if they false start a second time, then they're out. I mean,
and I think I actually disagree with that, because now you're changing the 110-meter hurdles to 111 meters. We'll even say.
Or the guy that false started, correct?
Yeah,
correct.
And I don't know that keeps it in the fairness of the
You're keeping them in the competition. It's better than disqualifying them.
Let them race, let them run the race, and whatever he false started at, then you take that off of the time, or you add, hey, you false started, because of that false started, you get a half a second added to your time. That makes you not first place anymore.
No, that doesn't work. You want to know why? Because if an athlete's false starts, you possibly throw the other athletes off because they're ready to start at a certain time and someone jumps the gun. Now their reaction time, is messed up. They have to go immediately while they were getting all set. They're like thrown into the actual race in a fraction of a second earlier than they had planned. So that kind of is unfair to them, to make them run the race and then just prorate the time after. So no, I don't go for that.
Well, I'm not sure that they are. I felt like this was a little bit of a black eye to track and field. Obviously, Alan, they were having this competition at the University of Oregon. So he was like the prodigal son there. Everybody was kind of waiting for this event because he was expected to win. He did have a.
No, he wasn't expected to win. He wasn't expected to win. He had a chance of winning. He wasn't the favorite. He came in third in the Olympic trials, barely.
Right, but he's ranked number 2 in the world in the hurdles to the guy who was right next to him, and he ran a 13.1 race where his best track time was 12.7.
But it doesn't always work that way. Guys sometimes win a race without running their best time. If Allen ran a 12.84, which I believe he did, yeah, I would have picked him to win the race going in. But what are the chances of that happening? It's a possibility, but it all, what bothers me, we hear the term sometimes fastest man in the world, and it's the fastest man on that day. I mean, listen, Noah Lyles ran in 1931. He's clearly the fastest 200-meter run in the world. He broke Michael Johnson's American record. Phenomenal 1931. I can safely say he's the fastest guy. But unless someone is dominant in their event, the way Noah Lyles now is in the 200 meters, they're not, you can't say that they're, clearly the favorite to win anything. And that's the case. Devin Allen was far from it. He's running major international competition before without medaling. Okay, he had a shot at winning the gold. He had a legitimate chance, but no, he wasn't favored there. Who knows what type of race he would have ran had he not been disqualified? And that's what makes it bad. We'll never know. We'll never know with all that training not to be given a chance. You could say it was taken away from him, or you could blame him for it. I mean, that's what the debate should be. Rules are the rules.
Well, he blamed himself. He blamed himself, but he also said that next time he'll try not to react so well. He'll try to react slower. And that's where I feel like maybe it's the rule that's the problem here, not necessarily. So I think, is it a difference if you were to lower it to 0.08? Instead of 0.1, 0.08.
But what about a receiver in football? They snap the ball, they're calling offside. It could be a fraction of a second. There's reaction time with that, with the lineman, with the discs, and you have more than one guy in there making calls.
And it's funny that you say that, because here you go. There was somebody, I was watching a play, somebody went offsides. Because he went offsides and he was so far offsides and they didn't blow the whistle as unabated to the quarterback, the tackle grabbed his face mask to hold him back. So the 5-yard penalty was negated for the 15-yard penalty of the face mask. And ultimately they got pushed back 15 yards because the personal foul outreached the 5-yard penalty.
Yeah.
However, if the referees did their job right, he would have never had to call the face mask because they would have blown the whistle right away as an unabated to the quarterback. So ultimately, you could say that somebody didn't do their job, and that's why they got pushed back 15 yards because the guy wound up beating the snap in the first place and was a whole 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage before the snap even happened. But ultimately that didn't happen, and you can't face mask anybody, and they wound up being penalized because all he was doing was protecting his quarterback. So to make sure his quarterback didn't get hit because the referee had the whistle in his pocket rather than in his hands. And that's kind of some of those things that I look at where if like I said, if this rule was 0.08 instead of 0.1, there was no question. There's no problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well,
they did
listen,
this.
I see the point. It left a bad taste in our mouth, especially it was a marquee event. He's from Oregon. The event is held in Oregon, and you built it up for so long only to tell the guy, you can't run, you're disqualified by the tiniest of margins, and it's not clear whether it was fair or not. And what's going to make it bad, Pax? Imagine they changed the rule, and under the new rule, he wouldn't have been disqualified. And then you look back, and such like a missed opportunity here, like a we'll never know type thing.
Right, but sometimes you need something like this to happen in the slimmest of margins. Like I said, I know that one time Usain Bolt was disqualified, but he was and under the rule that I'm projecting, he was still okay. He had a 0.084 rather than, and 0.08 is where that number is. That some people are going to have better reaction times than others. Now you got to sit back and be like, okay, well, I can't react. I hear the thing. Now I got to react. And that whole, quarter of a second, or I mean, some of these people, most of the reaction times on there were close to that 0.1 area. He was the only one that was 0.099. And like I said, they didn't go to the fourth decimal point. So we don't know if it was 0.0996 or 0.0992 or 0.0987. You know what I mean? We don't know any of that because the calibration is what it is. And is it calibrated after every race? Could they have possibly seen the one thing? Because you can't see the thousandth of a second difference. In fact, if you looked at the replay, you saw where it looked like the runner who wound up winning moved first. That he had actually lowered his.
But
rear.
just one last comment, because I know we have to wrap things up. In 1988 in the Olympics, Ben Johnson was ultimately disqualified for steroid use. But when he won the gold originally, Carl Lewis and a couple other runners, well, at least one other runner, thought he false started, but we didn't have the technology to know for sure. It was just opinion, the visual, naked look of the eye then. At least now we have technology, whether it's good or not, who knows?
Right. I remember that race. That was billed as like that was what everybody watched the Olympics for, was that specific race. Because right afterwards, Ben Johnson decided he was going to try to go make it in the NFL because he was one of the fastest guys there. I think he got a tryout and it never really panned out for anything beyond that. It's, and of course, this is more of a story to me because this guy's a Philadelphia Eagle. It's like, same thing with like Jeremy Bloom when he was, skiing, and then comes to the Eagles. It doesn't always work out, and I wish him well in camp, and hopefully he can make the team here just from his speed alone. But it's not a guarantee that he's going to make this team, and maybe he still will have the opportunity to compete later on and possibly win his way back into going to Olympics if things don't work out with the Eagles. But right now, he wants to help out the Eagles win a Super Bowl, and I'm happy about that. So. That being said, our 2 hours is done here, Jack. See, we made it through 2 hours, no problem. And we even got to talk for an hour by ourselves. So it rounds up pretty good. So tomorrow we get to do it again. It's our Sunday edition. And we'll have, of course, Keith Engel and Robert Butler. I like to call him Robert Palmer. It's going to be the first time I can.
Hold on.
From what I understand, Jim will not be on tomorrow. I'm not sure that 100%, so we'll see. However, I was told that he may have started his vacation a little early. So His contract says that he gets maybe 3 weeks. I don't know.
We have the
But
same agent, I think. Yeah.
there you go. There, you guys are working out. I have to get with that agent. The millions of dollars that I'm making here, but I don't get any vacation time. So, thank you everybody for paying attention and sticking with us today. And we will see you guys tomorrow on another Mac and Jack show. Everybody enjoy your Saturday and stay hydrated out there. It's hot. Take care, guys.